I'm caught in between the now and then. She tries to look at her life again. The innocent child, so scared to cry, so broken and hurt from all the lies.
About faith in the Bible, there'd be one chapter which would really refer a lot to faith. People refer to the book of faith, Hebrews chapter 11. On our discussion so far tonight, what would you say about Hebrews chapter 11 in relation to faith?
I mean, the very first couple of verses talking about what faith is.
About what faith is, and then it gives many examples of people of faith. What does that really mean to those persons of faith, as we've discussed already tonight?
Well, one of the first things you have to say about that list of people in Hebrews 11 is that they didn't get what they wanted necessarily, but faith in God has got nothing to do with getting what you want necessarily. It's about trusting, and the trust is based on exactly like Stuart was saying before. It's a gift of trust, because God has made himself trustworthy, and he's proved himself worthy of trust because of his revelation of his true nature. And then all of those people in the Old Testament that are listed in Hebrews 11, they all trust God no matter what the outcome is. And some people end up shutting the mouths of lions and overcoming enemies, while others get sawn in two and put to death and have really bad times. Yeah. And sometimes, if you actually go through the list, some of those people had those things happen on the same day. You can have good things and bad things. I mean, we all have good things and bad things on the same day. And trusting in God and suffering are not mutually exclusive. Sometimes actually they intertwine. I mean, Jesus Christ trusted the Father in ways that we will never do, and look where that got him. So it's nothing to do with outcomes. It's not magic. It's not getting things, not obtaining. It's not a means of obtaining commodities or anything. It simply means whatever else is going on, I know that God is worthy of trust. He's shown himself to be faithful, even when I'm not, and I'm just going to. You see the light even in a dark room, and you just keep on believing. And so all of the people, right from Abel right through to whoever they mention last, and they don't mention them all by name, they're all commended not for what they get or for their victorious living, but simply because they let themselves be carried in assurance, because God had proved himself faithful. Like Habakkuk 2 says, the ones who have been justified live by the faithfulness of God. So it's God's faithfulness to his covenant promises which brings justification in the first place, and then we just live out of that space. That's the vantage point that even the Old Testament people lived out of. And we have even more light in Christ, and so we live by the faithfulness of Christ. So it's simple trust. And it doesn't mean you get the victorious living thing, unless you understand victorious living as being loved and knowing that you're loved no matter what. I think that's pretty good. That's a pretty good place to start. If I had to trade in everything I own but still have that, no problem. That's an easy equation right there. So I guess that's where I'd be starting with Hebrews 11, saying that it's not a list of people who used their faith to get from God what they wanted, but rather God proved himself faithful to those people, and they trusted him even when it meant that it cost them their lives. So something like that.
Stuart, have you got something to add?
Yeah, I've got the New American Standard version in front of me here, and it starts off, now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. And I think that's a very important place to begin as we try to unpack the rest of the chapter, because what we're saying here, or we can replace the word faith with assurance, and there are other alternatives to the word assurance here, which is substance. So really what the first verse is trying to say is that God-given assurance is the core of our certainty. Elpidos is often translated hope, but I believe certainty is a better word to replace hope. With hope is, well, maybe it might happen, it might not happen. But elpidos gives us a sense of certainty, and how that comes about is God encounters us first. And it's the assurance that we gain from the encounter with God that gives us a certainty for our future, which is to come face to face with God. So if we read through the rest of the chapter and you have by faith, you can replace it with by God-given assurance. So God discloses himself. It is God who first discloses himself in such a way that the people gain certainty from their encounter and are able to carry out their lives in such a way that with their union and their relationship with God, they become heroes of the faith. And as David was saying, a lot of these heroes of the faith had very messy lives. Now, if you go into details, Abraham is considered the hero and the model of faith. But if you explore the life of Abraham, it is very messy. There are many times where he acted as if he didn't trust that God will come through on his word, that he will be a father of many nations. But God comes through in the end. So if we look at it that way, we can apply that to our lives when the reason we believe or we are Christian is God encounters us first. Now, opens our eyes, turns the light on, and we get a measure of certainty for our future. But it's not a guarantee that we're going to have an easy life. And personally, since I became a Christian, I have not had an easy life. But what seems to be the anchor for me and for many people I encounter is Christ himself. We know at the end, despite what happens and what is thrown at our life, it is Christ we're going to encounter. We're going to discover who God truly is in himself. We're going to see right into the core of his being. And as we do that, we're going to see right into the core of ourselves and realise the unity that we have. So the gift that comes by God-given assurance is God himself. That's the gift we receive. And I believe the heroes of the faith in Hebrews chapter 11 got a taste of that. That it is, God is the giver and the gift. And in, I don't know where it is at. It's in Genesis. I don't know which chapter. God says to Abraham,
15.
Yeah, I'm your exceedingly
great reward.
Yeah, I am your exceedingly great reward. And if we can focus on that it is God himself that is our exceedingly great reward, that provides us with an enormous amount of assurance. Now, when it is God personally who discloses that to us by his Spirit. And really that's the crux and the core of the whole of the New Testament. It's not the fluffy things of life, like having a nice car, a nice house, good job, and all those things. Those things don't matter. At the end of the day, what God is bringing us towards is the ultimate end of himself. where we not only see him, but we actually get to experience for ourselves what it is like to truly live like him and see like him and know like him. Why would you want anything else? Really, because when you see, know and live like him in that age, on this planet, in this world, it's going to be an amazing, indescribable experience. And I think that the heroes of the faith in Hebrews 11 got a taste of that. And I went, wow, let's move towards this. And I believe we should too. We should move towards this. God is the gift, the giver and the gift. Father, Son, and Spirit. And we're right in the middle of that. Beautiful.
On a clap.
I think we should run, not just move.
Yeah. Look, just running with what Stuart said, you know, where God has revealed himself and then his revelation is the assurance. And the assurance is his person that he's given to us, right? Let's flip to another passage. Let's go to Romans 8. Nothing can separate you from the love of God. Right? And then it goes on to say, in all these things we are more than conquerors. Not one of them is nice. War, famine, distress, naked, and it just goes on. In some of the terrible things of life, we are met by this beings of love. So let's not disconnect faith, which people do, from love. You with me? Remember, it's tied to the revelation of Christ. As God reveals himself to us, we believe. As God reveals himself to us, we know love. Don't have faith as a commodity outside. It's based around the person. This person who loves us. As his love comes to us, we have assurance. As his love's our assurance, we believe it. That's faith. Faith is in love. Faith's not a power we use.
So you're getting back to that Hebrews passage, just remembering the context of the whole book. Hebrews is a really powerful letter, which I think the church, all of the church, needs to sit down and read from beginning to end, because it's about the church today, just as it was about the first Hebrew Christians. It was written to them to assure them that Christ was everything they needed and more, and that they didn't need to go back into their Jewish cult and their Jewish forms of worship. And if they did, if they tried to add to what Christ had done and what he is and who he is, then they're actually taking away from him, and it becomes like a blasphemy almost to add to what Christ has done. And in that list in Hebrews 11, I only recently became aware of this, but you've got Cain and Abel, and they are like they're the first two acts of worship in the Bible, of sacrifice and so on. And they are like the two headwaters of two great rivers that run right through human history. And then you've got Abel, whose name actually means to breathe, and you've got Cain, which means to acquire. And they're the two forms of worship. One form of worship acquires things and does things for God and gets the blessing, and the other one just breathes. It's natural. It responds and receives. And then, because there's no explanation about why Abel's offering was seen as a good offering and Cain's wasn't, because they're both legal offerings as far as the law was concerned. But what Cain was trying to do was use his sacrifice to leverage God, whereas Abel was responding to the goodness of God and just giving out of what God had already given to him. And so Cain offered his offering in faith. He offered a better sacrifice in faith, Abel did, than Cain. And Cain was using his sacrifice to get, and Abel was just naturally flowing out of what he had already been given. And And that came not from a Christian source, that came from a Jewish source, to a Jewish commentary about the Genesis. And so that was, and I just thought, wow, that really does explain a lot of the differences and why the writer to the Hebrews uses that list that he does in Hebrews 11, because that meant a lot to Hebrew people, because the Hebrew people know the history and they understand what's going on there. And these are people who well, Abel being a perfect example, by faith he got himself murdered. Can you see what I'm saying? It's not about what you get out of it. But, and then poor old Cain, of course, ended up being separated from the land. He could no longer use the land to acquire anything anymore. And the very thing that he was trying to get, he could no longer get. And yes, there's a whole world of stuff going on in that.
So would Abel be a type of Christ then?
I believe so. Actually, if you follow it all the way through, Abel is just like Christ, who gets murdered by Cain. And it even goes into that in Hebrews 12 and said, don't be dissuaded by the pressure you're getting from sinful men. And by sinful men, he doesn't mean immoral men. He means men who want you to do what Cain did, and that is acquire spiritual blessing by doing certain things. And he said, and because Jesus Christ also had to got opposition from sinful men. And who were the sinful men? The Pharisees. Not the tax collectors, not the prostitutes. They weren't the sinful people. It was the people who were resisting the gift that was given. And so he got murdered just like Cain did. And so Abel, in that sense, and if anyone, if we're like anyone, we're like Cain. And Jesus Christ comes and he's the Abel that we murder. And so there's a lot going on in that.
Yeah, so really the book of Hebrews chapter 11 really is, from what you said tonight, is really good, because it once again draws out our participation in what's going on. We're participating with Christ. So we don't have to look up to those heroes of faith in Hebrews chapter 11. We are actually like them. We are participating in that. We're
just like them.
We're just like them.
You know, David, murderer; Jacob, backstabbing liar; Abraham, coward; Samson. Well, we don't even have to talk about him. And
we participate. Yes. All right. What's any more? You want any more to add to that? Carol, time's getting on. Suppose we'll close it. Leave it there for now.
Caught in between the now and then. She tries to look at her life again. The innocent child, so scared to cry, so broken